My guest at this time is the author of TrumpMania, Vince McMahon, WWE, and the Making of America's 45th President. He has just released the 2020 Election Special Edition. It's Lavie Margolin. Lavie, welcome back to the Daily. Congratulations on the re-release.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I love to see a copy in your hand. Usually I'm putting it up to the camera, so we're of the same mind.
Yeah, buddy. Well, I got one right here. I just finished reading the latest update of it. You know, of course, you released this 4 years. It's been, what, 3.5, 4 years ago since the first one.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, right, January 2018 was when the last one came out. But, of course, it was about a year writing it beforehand. So there was a lot more to say forward. And my research skills got better. So I was happy to find some very interesting things that I totally missed last time.
Yeah, so the first time you wrote this, Trump had just been in office not that long, right? And you wanted to let everybody know about the relationship to McMahon's and Trump. This time around, you're talking more in depth about what the relationship has been like since they've gone to Washington together. I'll start by asking you, Lavie, is there anything that surprised you while putting together the latest installment of this book?
So certainly, looking deeper into the past, there was a number of things that were sort of surprised me or more insightful. One of the things that I had missed last time was certainly I mentioned Jesse Ventura becoming governor, but how key he was to where Trump is now was something that I missed. So I'm going to go out on a limb and saying that if Ventura did not become governor of Minnesota, we would not have President Trump today.
Okay.
One of for two reasons. One was Ventura was able to harness something called the dude vote. I read an academic book on this, and that was actually the term that they used, which was really cool. So it's kind of thinking about the disaffected young voter, usually male, mid-20s to 30s, somebody that usually works with their hands, construction worker and so on, and they feel sort of on the outside. You know, when an outlet like the New York Times writes about them, they're sort of looked down on them. And these people often don't vote. So if you can harness the power of this voter, you know, it's very powerful. Okay. And secondly, sort of like in terms of the overall strategy, when Ventura won, Trump had been flirting many times with becoming president. And he actually met with Ventura and his campaign manager to learn about his strategies.
Really? Yeah. Well, of course I know that. I read this here. Yeah. But that's really interesting there with Jesse and Trump, you know, because they don't, I don't know. Do you think they're cut from the same cloth? I mean, in some ways they seem very similar, but in some ways they also feel very different people from the way you write about them.
No, I think that they are different. Like a lot of relationships we see with Trump and even McMahon. I can't say so much about, you know, Ventura's sort of his wide spectrum of his network, but between the first two, a lot of them are sort of connections of convenience, of sort of like of value, sort of like, what do you mean to me today? And we see a lot with WWE, people in and out of the company, and even with Trump's administration and his companies, you could be in good graces, you're out, you're back again. We can work together even though we don't get along because there's money to be made. And that's a very interesting way to sort of like run your life.
Yeah, that is. You know, and you talk about Vince and Donald's relationship, which is a big part of this book, but like the relationship between Donald and Linda, you know, is a really interesting one to me too, because, you know, obviously the fans know, you know, Vince McMahon much more, right? He's been on TV a lot more. He's a much more public figure. Linda, a little bit more behind the scenes. What do you think we learned from what Linda is like when really the reins are taken off and she's allowed to go be the full-on politician and powerful figure that it seems like she's wanted to be for at least the last decade or so?
Right, I agree. I think even going back to the early 2000s, Linda started demonstrating more involvement in the political process and sort of developing more of a niche for herself. Certainly as the president of the WWF, she had accomplished much, and some of the first times she was interacting with politicians was in representing the company at these commission hearings in more famously New Jersey, but prior to that, as they talked about, in Pennsylvania. But by the 2000s, she's starting to give money to different politicians for small amounts. Just a fun tidbit is that one of the first politicians she gives to is a Stephanie Hunter Sanchez, which is just funny in retrospect. But then her amounts start increasing, and one of the things in terms of labeling was that she would give to Republicans, but she wasn't against giving to Democrats also. And some of the media at that time, the conservative media, tagged her as a liberal wrestling promoter. So she got out there in terms of her Senate campaigns, and it was a learning experience. The first one was sort of like pushing WWE, and in some ways she tries to divorce herself from that. There was even a wrestling show held in Connecticut, which was sort of like an appreciation night for her, and she didn't show up. So, you know, she kind of like wants to step away from it. The second time, the strategy was like, don't push the WWE at all, kind of step away from that, although it's hard to divorce yourself. Sure. One of the things she did to establish herself, though, is somebody that has money, and that's somebody that's always of value. So you want to be in her good graces so that you can get some of that money if you're campaigning. And in her role as the small business administrator, that was a cabinet level position, but now she has a key role as a fundraiser for Trump, running a couple of his PACs. But for her, it's been a little bit disappointing, it looks like, because she's generally the biggest donor. The PACs were started to try and raise funds from some of the 200 biggest donors last time. I'm not sure if Shahid Khan had made that list. He did give $1 million to Trump in 2016. He hasn't given this year, or at least hasn't given yet. But she hasn't been able to garner that, which is, you know, she can only do so much, right? A lot of people are sort of had certain expectations of Trump, whatever they were. And, you know, obviously he's very polarizing, even if you supported him in 2016 as to what's going on now.
Yeah, for sure. And with Linda too, you know, and her relationship with Donald, like, why do you feel that she was able to leave his administration, get such praise, and find herself in like this, you know, fundraising role that she's in now? Because it's very different. Most people that leave his administration do not get the kind words and the beautiful send off that Linda McMahon got.
Right. It's only really Nikki Haley that I could think about that did well, sort of like leaving on great terms.
Yeah.
I think although Linda was never elected, she's a great politician. She really knows the way to navigate things. There's some local press as she was touring the 60-plus SBA offices all over the country, where they asked her how Trump is doing, and she said, "Well, I'm really very busy with this job." So she's able to sort of step out of it. And even when she was supporting Governor Christie from New Jersey in his run for president, because he had come and supported her, when they asked her about Trump, she said that, you know, what he's saying isn't helping women, but she sort of wouldn't say who she was ultimately going to support. So she's been very careful about that and sort of staying on the good side of Trump. And even most people, I think, of people associated with her administration, you know, from the wrestling side, sometimes we bring up very legitimate things about what the company has done wrong, but for her as a person, she hasn't been very polarizing sort of to the general public.
So, yeah, you know, what do you think that she thinks? What do you think Linda thinks of this guy? Obviously, she said some things publicly that were not great about him, but, you know, he also has, you know, she's been able to weather it. What do you think what do you think Linda thinks of Donald Trump?
I don't know if Linda has ever fully sort of revealed her personality. A lot of times it's very much in the public view, and she's very careful and calculated about, you know, the way that she acts. You know, there's certain things where she's obviously passionate about. Something about Sacred Heart University in Connecticut makes her, you know, want to be connected with them. She's obviously very passionate about sort of the idea of work-life balance, women's empowerment. You know, 9/11 seemed to be, you know, as it was for most people, certainly, you know, a significant issue for her to donate money. But like, sort of like, what does she think about other people? I don't know if, you know, she's ever revealed that hand.
Yeah, you know, that's definitely something. Like, I'm reading this, you talk about just what a great politician she is. You know, it's like, I don't really know what to make of Linda, right? What we do know, though, is, you know, she's moved into this new role outside of the administration. You know, definitely looks like she helped to influence down in Florida what was going on through the coronavirus. What did you make of the way that Linda and the Super PAC helped allow WWE to continue doing business in Florida during the coronavirus? I mean, it seems wild to see all these pieces kind of come together so quickly in a moment like that.
Yeah, so I know that, sort of like, and I did put it together sort of in the book in terms of like from steps 1 to 5 in
Right.
terms of dedicating the money to a super PAC and then them getting approval. I'm not sure though, like if I'm fully convinced, one way or another about that. But just in terms of, Linda, in terms of the way that she's handling things, sometimes like the leader of an organization sort of like it trickles down, and I think she could be doing things a certain way, and the way that she writes on the super PAC's website would be like Beijing Biden, get a hashtag going, and Sleepy Joe. It's just kind of, it's embarrassing, and I think for the mistakes that she's made, in running a company or co-running it, I think it's kind of like, can't you be above that? But I don't know, what's the new normal besides the virus new normal? What's the new normal of interacting with people? Maybe that's where we are now, unfortunately.
Yeah, and one thing that I wonder about is WWE as a vehicle to like embolden Donald Trump's agenda, right, and policies. Definitely when they continued on through the coronavirus, as Trump was pushing for things to keep going, I thought that was very interesting. But also with Saudi Arabia, Donald Trump had made it clear he wanted to do more with the Saudis. Vince McMahon, against all odds, went in there, took this huge deal, even though the Khashoggi stuff kept going. What did you learn and think about the relationship between Donald Trump, the McMahon, WWE, and the Saudis? And you bring up sports washing too. I didn't know if you could talk a little bit about whether or not you see these trips over there truly as philanthropic, or if you see them as somehow kind of helping a nefarious regime.
Sure. So of course, the bottom line of any.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay. Of course, the bottom line of any corporation is, to bring value to its shareholders, whether it's public or not. I remember the first time I heard that in like a college intro class, I was like, wow, I thought they were trying to do good things. I think firstly, what drives the McMahons and, Trump and, other people is money many times. So I think they sort of, when they do something controversial, they have to sort of couch it in the best way possible to say, like, we're doing this for change. But when you're going out there and you're doing running shows, and it's either overtly promoting, the country, or it's, at least not disassociating it from it, it's endorsing it, and it's using sports or entertainment as a vehicle to sort of advance things. And it's very different if you remember, like from the mid to late 80s, with South Africa, de Klerk, and the way that they were treating people over there. There was a whole movement. We won't play Sun City. So look at how things have changed there. But certainly the WWE has taken advantage of the opportunities afforded by Trump. But I think they're somewhat lucky in that they're sort of able to sort of take the tailwind of another company that's sort of unabashedly doing it, which is the UFC and Dana White. WWE, they barely mention Trump and so on. But like Dana White's like, hey, I just watched the fights with him and he's great, and I'm going to speak at his convention. So it sort of opens the door. And I've been thinking about this in the last couple of days. Like, if the WWE actually brought Trump onto Raw or SmackDown, I think based on what the UFC has done themselves, I don't know if it would be as controversial as if they had done it as a standalone.
Oh man, I've just kind of put that out of my mind. I mean, do you think that's a possibility that we see Donald Trump showing up on like Raw or SmackDown?
I think after the election, it's sort of like once he's sorry, I don't want to be predicting anything, and but if he is elected, I think sort of like everything is out the window. Sort of like he'll do more of what he wants.
Sure.
And then if he's not reelected, and doesn't continue on, which aren't necessarily connected elements, that he'll want to be back in the public eye, and that's one of the first places that will embrace him. And there's 400, from what I've read or heard, there's $450 million of debt to pay down. So whatever you can do that's certainly a good way to make a couple million.
Couple things stemming out of that. First, I want to talk about what you learned about the demo that watches pro wrestling. There's a part where you talked about how it was found out that when there was like some poll about sports, that a large portion of pro wrestling fans are Democratic. Were you surprised to find that out? Do you think that's why Vince is holding off on embracing Trump and doing more with what's going on right now in politics?
I think, in terms of the latter part first, I think he's more apprehensive about his advertisers and his partners, who tend to be sort of middle of the road as entertainment companies mostly. Even Fox, they try and separate themselves between the news and the other things that they do, certainly. But interestingly, I think it was the Washington Post that had done the study, and the only two sports that did lean much stronger in terms of Republican were ice hockey and college football.
Okay.
But one of the most fascinating things that I learned in the book was that ultimately SmackDown Your Vote sort of was revealed the night before the 2000 elections as, that they're heavily favoring the Republican candidate, Bush. However, Gary Davis in the LA Times, when SmackDown Your Vote first started, they said, our base is middle America Republicans, and we think this will serve them well. So they were sort of like, they put that out there right away. Nobody noticed, and then they kept moving forward as like a nonpartisan organization.
Yeah, interesting. And you also bring up the $450 million that a lot of people believe Trump to be in debt. I'm going to go backwards a little bit. Earlier in your book, in the original release, you go like in depth about like Trump and Atlantic City and some nefarious characters he'd surrounded himself with. Do you think America should be worried about who Donald Trump maybe owes this money to right now and what could be dictating his politics at the moment?
I think based on his track record of establishing connections internationally from the former Soviet Union, and just branding that's been in a variety of countries and contacts, and the big banks that aren't talking that had continued to lend him money, I think we really want to know what's going on, and we should be concerned because it appears that Trump has been for himself from the beginning, and we don't really know what makes him tick still. So is it in our best interest? That's something to be concerned about.
Yeah. All right. Well, lastly here, Lavie, I got to ask you to wrap it up. Last night and we're recording this the day after the first presidential debate. What a promo battle that was last night. Two men fighting over a microphone. What do you think that the Democrats need to realize or take advantage of to battle Donald Trump in his pro wrestling carny type style?
I think they sort of had the idea, but once you're in the thick of it, once you're in the mud, as Biden once said, like, it's very hard to resist, right? So, Biden knew to sort of ignore his general insults, but when you start talking about his son that had served and who passed away young, and another son that had an addiction problem, and you're accusing him of thievery internationally, like, it's very hard not to get emotional about that. But generally, I appreciate how Biden would sort of like talk to the American public and kind of focus on the issues. But if you're going to have somebody that can constantly interrupt where the moderator doesn't have control, you're going to still have this challenge. I don't think you could win at the promo game, as the mayor, Kraut Kramer, that was competing with Jesse Ventura, learned very quickly for that part-time job. So you have to go a different way.
Yeah. All right, Lavie. Well, I want to encourage everybody to go check it out. It's TrumpMania. The 2020 election special edition has just been released, or I guess the book has been re-released. Lavie, where do you want to tell people to find this? Go get it and support you and all those great things.
Sure. So all roads lead to Amazon. There's a print copy, a Kindle edition. The book is 50% bigger than the original and about 65% revised. Really learn about not only WWE's history, but Trump's history and how the two thread together. And I'd love to hear from you on Twitter, Lavie Marg, Lavie Marg. Kramer.